On the frozen edge of a brutal frontier ridge, a mother faces the most impossible choice: hand her children to strangers or watch them die in the blizzard. No food, no shelter, no hope left. But then, a lone cowboy appears through the storm, and his decision changes everything. Stay with me until the end of the story, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. Now, let me take you back to that frozen ridge where desperation met fate, and where one man's choice rewrote the future for a family on the edge of extinction. The wind came in hard off the ridge, carrying ice that cut like broken glass. Elena Voss pressed her back against the rotted planks of the abandoned rail stop, her two children huddled beneath her threadbare coat. The boy, Tommy, was 6. The girl, Lily, barely 4. Both had stopped shivering an hour ago, and that terrified her more than the storm. Her breath came shallow, each exhale a white cloud that vanished into the gray chaos around them. The rail stop was supposed to have been a waypoint, a place to rest before the final push west, but there was no train, no travelers, no mercy in the sky. She looked down at Tommy's face. His lips had gone pale, almost blue. Lily wasn't even crying anymore. Elena's hands trembled as she pulled them closer, trying to share warmth that didn't exist. Her mind circled back to the same terrible thought, the one she'd been fighting for the last 3 hours. She had to let them go. Not into the storm, into the hands of someone, anyone, who could save them. It was insane. It was unthinkable. But watching them fade in her arms was worse. "Mama," Tommy whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind. "I'm cold." "I know, baby." Her voice cracked. "I know." Lily didn't say anything. She just stared up at Elena with those wide, glassy eyes, too tired to understand what was happening. Elena scanned the ridge again, squinting through the snowfall. There had to be someone. A rider. A trapper. A wagon train that got delayed. Nothing. Just white. Just wind. Just the slow, creeping certainty that she was about to lose everything. She closed her eyes and said a silent prayer. Not to any deity, just to the universe, to fate, to whatever force governed this godforsaken stretch of wilderness. Please, someone, anyone. And then she heard it. Hoofbeats. Faint at first, muffled by the storm, but unmistakable. Her head snapped up, heart slamming against her ribs. Through the snow, a shape emerged. A man on horseback, moving slow and deliberate through the drifts. He wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, a heavy coat dusted white, and a rifle slung across his back. Elena stumbled to her feet, nearly dropping Lily in the process. "Wait, please, wait!" The rider pulled his horse to a stop about 10 feet away. He didn't dismount, didn't speak, just looked at her with eyes the color of storm clouds, sharp and assessing. Elena's voice came out in a desperate rush. "Please, I need help. My children, they're freezing. I can't—" She choked on the words, her throat tightening. "I can't keep them warm anymore." The man's gaze shifted to Tommy and Lily, then back to her. His expression didn't change. "Please," she said again, hating the sound of her own voice, hating how broken it was. "If you can just take them somewhere safe, anywhere, I'll do anything. I'll pay you when I can, I swear, You want me to take your kids?" His voice was low, rough, like gravel under a boot. "Just until I can find work. Just until— And what happens to you?" Elena blinked. She hadn't thought that far, hadn't let herself. "I'll manage," she said, though they both knew it was a lie. The man studied her for a long moment. Then he swung down from his horse, boots crunching in the snow. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by wind and sun. Not old, but not young either. Somewhere in that hard middle where life had already taken its cuts. He walked past her and crouched in front of Tommy, who shrank back instinctively. "Hey," the man said, his tone softer now. "You okay, son?" Tommy didn't answer, just stared. The man reached out and touched the boy's forehead, checking for fever. Then he did the same with Lily, who flinched but didn't pull away. Elena watched, her breath caught somewhere between hope and terror. Finally, the man stood and turned to face her. "I'm not taking your kids." Her stomach dropped. "Please, I'm taking all 3 of you." Elena froze. "What?" "You heard me?" He gestured toward his horse. "Get the boy up first. I'll carry the girl. You'll ride behind me." I don't understand. You don't have to. He was already moving, lifting Tommy with one arm and setting him on the saddle like he weighed nothing. We've got maybe 2 hours before this storm gets worse. If you want your kids to live, you'll stop asking questions and start moving. Elena's legs felt like lead, but she forced herself forward. The man handed Lily up to Tommy, then turned to her. Can you ride? Yes, a little. Good enough. He gripped her waist and hoisted her up behind the children, then swung up in front, taking the reins. Hold on to them. Don't let go. Where are we going? My ranch, about 8 miles northwest. Why are you doing this? He didn't answer, just spurred the horse forward, and they plunged back into the storm. Watan. The ride was hell. The wind tore at them from every direction, and the cold was so deep it felt like drowning. Elena wrapped her arms around Tommy and Lily, pressing them against the man's broad back, using his body as a shield. He didn't speak, didn't look back, just kept the horse moving, steady and sure, like he could see through the snow. Elena's thoughts spiraled. Who was this man? Why was he helping them? And what would he want in return? She'd learned the hard way that nothing came free, not in this world. But she was too exhausted to fight it, too cold to care. All she could do was hold on. An hour in, the horse stumbled. Elena gasped as they lurched sideways, the animal's front legs sinking into a hidden drift. The man cursed under his breath and dismounted, grabbing the reins and pulling the horse forward by force. Everyone off, he said sharply. Elena slid down, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. She pulled Tommy and Lily down after her, holding them close. The man led the horse forward a few steps, testing the ground. Then he turned back to Elena. We have to walk from here, snow's too deep. How much farther? 3 miles. Maybe 4. Elena looked at her children. Tommy could barely stand. Lily was half asleep in her arms. They can't walk that far. Then I'll carry them. Both of them? He didn't answer, just stepped forward, took Lily from her arms, and settled the girl against his chest. Then he crouched and gestured for Tommy to climb onto his back. Come on, son. Up you go. Tommy hesitated, looking at Elena for permission. She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. The boy climbed on, wrapping his thin arms around the man's neck. And just like that, the man stood, carrying both children like it was nothing, and started walking. Elena followed, stumbling through the snow, her body screaming in protest. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because this stranger, this man who owed her nothing, was carrying her children through a blizzard, and she didn't even know his name. By the time they reached the ranch, Elena could barely see straight. The man's property appeared like a ghost through the snow. A low-slung cabin, a barn, a few scattered outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney, a thin gray line against the white sky. He kicked the door open and carried the children inside, setting them down near the fireplace. The heat hit Elena like a wall, and she nearly collapsed. Sit, the man said, pointing to a chair. She obeyed, too exhausted to argue. He moved fast, pulling blankets from a chest and wrapping Tommy and Lily in layers. Then he filled a kettle and set it over the fire, his movements efficient and practiced. Elena watched him, her mind still struggling to catch up. Thank you, she said finally, her voice hoarse. He didn't look at her. Save it. I mean it. You didn't have to. I said save it. His tone wasn't cruel, just firm, final. Elena fell silent. The man poured water into tin cups and handed them to the children, kneeling in front of them. Slow sips. Don't drink too fast. Tommy took the cup with shaking hands. Lily just stared. The man waited, patient, until she finally took a sip. Then he stood and walked to the far side of the room, pulling off his coat and hanging it on a peg. Elena got her first real look at him. Tall, lean, with the kind of strength that came from years of hard work. His hair was dark, streaked with gray at the temples. His hands were scarred, calloused. He moved like someone who didn't waste motion. What's your name? She asked. He glanced at her. Caleb Rourke. I'm Elena Voss. These are my children, Tommy and Lily. Caleb nodded, but didn't offer anything else. Mr. Rourke, just Caleb. Caleb. She swallowed. Why did you help us? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. Because I could, he said finally. It wasn't an answer, but it was all she was going to get. That night, Elena lay awake in the small side room Caleb had given them, listening to her children breathe. They were safe, warm, alive. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just traded one kind of danger for another. She didn't know this man, didn't know what he wanted, didn't know if he'd ask for payment she couldn't give. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was the way he'd carried her children through the storm. Like they mattered, like they were worth saving. And that terrified her more than anything. The next morning, Elena woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She sat up slowly, her body aching from the previous day's ordeal. Tommy and Lily were still asleep, curled together under a pile of blankets. She slipped out of the room and found Caleb at the stove, cooking breakfast like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Morning," she hesitated. "Can I help?" "Sit." She sat. Caleb plated the food and set it in front of her. Eggs, bacon, biscuits, more food than she'd seen in weeks. "Eat," he said. "What about the children?" "I'll bring them theirs when they wake up." Elena picked up a fork, her hands trembling slightly. The food was good, simple, but good. Caleb poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, watching her. "You planning to tell me what you were doing out there?" he asked. Elena set down her fork. "Running." "From what?" "My husband." Caleb's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "He dead?" "I don't know, maybe. I hope so." "That why you had nothing? No supplies, no money, no plan?" Elena's jaw tightened. "I had a plan. It just didn't work out." "No kidding." She glared at him. "Look, I appreciate what you did. But if you're going to lecture me..." "I'm not lecturing. I'm asking, because if someone's coming after you, I need to know." Elena's stomach twisted. She hadn't thought about that. Hadn't let herself. "I don't think he'll find us," she said quietly. "We've been running for months. I've been careful." Caleb took a sip of coffee. "Careful doesn't mean safe." "I know." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, you can stay here until the storm clears. After that, we'll figure out next steps." "I can't pay you." "Didn't ask you to." "Then what do you want?" Caleb set down his cup and looked her straight in the eye. "I want you to stop acting like I'm going to hurt you." Elena blinked, caught off guard. "I'm not your husband," Caleb continued, his voice steady. "I'm not here to take anything from you. You needed help. I gave it, that's all." Elena wanted to believe him, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Okay," she said finally. Caleb nodded and turned back to the stove, and Elena sat there, trying to figure out what the hell she'd just walked into. The storm lasted 3 days. During that time, Elena and her children stayed in Caleb's cabin, existing in a strange, suspended reality. Caleb didn't ask questions, didn't push, just went about his work, feeding the animals, chopping wood, keeping the fire going, while Elena tried to make herself useful. She cooked, cleaned, mended clothes. Anything to justify their presence. Tommy and Lily slowly came back to life. The color returned to their cheeks, their laughter started to fill the cabin. And Caleb, for all his gruffness, was surprisingly gentle with them. He showed Tommy how to stack wood properly. Let Lily help him feed the chickens. Answered their endless questions with patience Elena hadn't expected. It was unsettling, because the more she watched him, the less she understood. He didn't smile much, didn't talk much, but there was something solid about him, something reliable, and Elena didn't know what to do with that. On the third night, after the children had gone to bed, Elena found Caleb sitting by the fire, a bottle of whiskey in his hand. He offered it to her without a word. She took it and drank, the burn grounding her. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You're going to anyway." "Why do you live out here alone?" Caleb stared into the fire. "Because it's quiet." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." Elena handed the bottle back. "You're not very good at conversation." "Never claimed to be." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. "I had a family once," Caleb said suddenly. Elena looked at him, startled. "A wife? A daughter?" His voice was flat, emotionless. "They died." 7 years ago. Storm came through, worse than this one. I was out checking the herd. By the time I got back, he trailed off, jaw tight. Elena's chest ached. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's done. Is that why you helped us? Caleb took a long drink. Maybe. I don't know. I just couldn't walk away. Elena understood that. The weight of it. The impossibility of turning your back when someone needed you. Thank you, she said quietly. Caleb didn't respond, just stared into the flames, lost in whatever ghosts he carried. And Elena sat beside him, realizing that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only one running from something. The storm broke on the 4th day. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the window, the first she'd seen in what felt like forever. She found Caleb outside saddling his horse. Where are you going? She asked. Town. Need to pick up supplies. Check if anyone's been asking about strangers. Elena's blood went cold. You think someone's looking for us? Don't know, but I'm not taking chances. Can I come with you? No. You stay here with the kids. Keep the door locked. If anyone shows up, you don't answer. You hear me? Elena nodded, her heart pounding. Caleb swung up into the saddle and looked down at her. I'll be back before dark. And if you're not, his expression hardened, then you take the kids and run. Before she could respond, he spurred the horse forward and disappeared down the trail. Elena stood there, staring after him, a sick feeling settling in her gut, because she knew, deep down, that the running wasn't over. Not yet. Caleb returned just as the sun was setting, his face grim. Elena met him at the door, her stomach in knots. What did you find? Caleb dismounted and led the horse to the barn, not answering. Elena followed. Caleb, what did you find? He tied off the horse and turned to face her. There's men in town, 3 of them, asking about a woman and 2 kids. Elena's knees went weak. What did they say? They're claiming you're a runaway, that the kids aren't yours, that you kidnapped them. That's a lie. I know. How do you know? Caleb's jaw tightened. Because I've seen enough liars to know what they look like. And those men? They're not looking for justice. They're looking for bounty. Elena's mind raced. What do we do? We don't do anything. You stay here. I'll handle it. Handle it how? Caleb pulled his rifle from the saddle and checked the chamber. By making sure they don't find you. Elena's breath caught. Caleb, go inside, lock the door, keep the kids quiet. You can't just... Elena. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw something fierce in his eyes, something unbreakable. I'm not letting anyone take them. You understand me? Elena nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Caleb turned and walked toward the cabin, rifle in hand, and Elena followed, her heart pounding, knowing that whatever came next, there was no going back. Inside the cabin, Elena pulled the children close, her pulse hammering in her ears. Tommy looked up at her with wide eyes, sensing the shift in the air. Mama, what's wrong? Nothing, baby. Everything's fine. The lie tasted bitter, but she forced a smile. We just need to be very quiet for a while, okay? Lily pressed her face into Elena's shoulder, already understanding in that wordless way children do when danger is near. Caleb moved through the cabin with deliberate calm, checking the windows, securing the door. He pulled the curtains shut, dimming the interior to near darkness except for the low glow of the fire. How many bullets you got? Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb glanced at her. Enough. That's not an answer. It's the one you're getting. He positioned himself near the front window, rifle resting against his shoulder, eyes scanning the darkening landscape outside. Elena's mind spun through possibilities, each worse than the last. If these men had tracked them this far, they weren't going to stop. And if they were claiming the children weren't hers, that she'd kidnapped them, then the law wouldn't help. Nobody would believe a desperate woman over 3 men with a story and probably some forged papers to back it up. Why would they say I kidnapped my own children? She asked, more to herself than to Caleb. Because it works, Caleb said without turning. Woman alone, no husband, no proof of ownership. They'll say anything that gets them what they want. Which is what? Money. Someone's paying them to bring you back. Or the kids. Maybe both. Elena's stomach twisted. She knew exactly who would pay. Richard Voss, her husband, had connections that reached farther than she'd hoped. He'd never wanted the children, saw them as burdens, inconveniences, but his pride wouldn't tolerate a wife who ran, especially one who took his property with her. "They won't stop," she said quietly. "I know." "So what's the plan? We can't just wait here forever." Caleb finally looked at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "The plan is I keep you alive. Everything else comes second." Before Elena could respond, Lily whimpered. Elena pulled her closer, murmuring reassurances that felt hollow even as she spoke them. The minutes stretched like hours. The cabin filled with the kind of silence that makes every creak of wood sound like a gunshot. Tommy shifted restlessly, and Elena put a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. Then, hoofbeats. Caleb stiffened, his grip tightening on the rifle. "Get them in the back room, now." Elena didn't argue. She gathered the children and moved quickly to the small bedroom, shutting the door behind them. Through the thin walls, she could hear everything. The horses stopping outside, the jingle of spurs, low voices. A knock rattled the door. "Hello, the house." A man's voice, smooth and practiced. "We're looking for someone. Just want to talk." Caleb didn't answer. Another knock. Harder this time. "Come on now, friend. No need to be unfriendly. We're not here to cause trouble." Elena pressed her ear to the door, her heart slamming against her ribs. "I said we just want to talk," the voice called again, irritation creeping in. "We're looking for a woman, Elena Voss, traveling with 2 children. You seen anyone like that?" Silence. Then Caleb's voice, cold and flat. "No." A pause. "You sure about that? Because we heard different. Heard a man brought someone in from the ridge a few days back." "Heard wrong." "That's so." The voice took on a sharper edge. "Mind if we take a look inside? Just to be sure." "Yeah, I mind." Footsteps crunched in the snow, more than one set. Elena's breathing quickened. "Listen, friend," the voice said, closer now, right outside the door. "We're not asking. We got a legal writ here. That woman kidnapped those children. We're taking them back to their rightful family." "That writ mean anything out here?" Caleb asked. "Means we got the law on our side." "Law's a long way from here." A different voice spoke up, rougher, less patient. "You protecting a criminal, mister. That makes you an accomplice." "That what you're calling it?" "That's what a judge will call it when we drag your ass to town." Caleb's response was so quiet, Elena almost missed it. "You're welcome to try." The tension outside ratcheted up. Elena could feel it even through the walls, the shift from talk to threat, from negotiation to violence. "Last chance," the smooth voice said. "Open the door, hand over the woman and the kids, walk away clean. Or what? Or we burn you out." Elena's blood turned to ice. She looked at Tommy and Lily, their faces pale in the darkness, and felt the suffocating weight of every decision that had led them here. Caleb's voice came again, still calm, still steady. "You light that fire. You better be ready to die for it." Silence, then laughter, cold and mocking. "Big talk from one man. One man's all it takes." The laughter stopped. Elena heard the scrape of boots, the creak of leather. Someone was moving, positioning themselves. Her mind screamed at her to do something, but there was nothing to do. They were trapped. Then a voice she didn't recognize, younger, uncertain. "Maybe we should just—" "Shut up, Davies," the rough voice again. "We're not leaving without them. I'm just saying, if he's willing to die over this, then he dies. Simple as that." Elena's hands shook as she pulled the children into the corner, shielding them with her body. If bullets started flying, there was nowhere to run. Outside, Caleb spoke again. "I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to listen. Those people inside, they're under my protection. That means if you want them, you go through me. And I promise you, only one of us walks away from that. You think you can take all 3 of us? I know I can kill at least 2 before you get me. Question is, which 2 of you want to die today?" The silence that followed was different, heavier. The kind of quiet that comes when men start doing math in their heads, weighing odds, calculating risk. "This is bullshit," the rough voice muttered. "We're wasting time." "Then make your move," Caleb said. Nobody moved. Elena pressed her forehead against the wall, hardly daring to breathe. The standoff stretched, seconds bleeding into minutes. She could hear her own heartbeat, loud and frantic in her ears. Finally, the smooth voice spoke again, all pretense of friendliness gone. All right, we'll go, but this isn't over. Figured as much. We'll be back, with more men. And when we come, you won't have a choice. I'll be here. More footsteps, the creak of saddles, hoofbeats retreating into the distance. Elena stayed frozen, not trusting it, waiting for the gunshot that would signal it was all a trick. But it didn't come. After what felt like an eternity, Caleb's voice came through the door, low and steady. They're gone. Elena sagged against the wall, her legs suddenly weak. She opened the door and stepped out, the children clinging to her. Caleb was still at the window, rifle ready, watching the horizon. Are they really gone? She asked. For now. What does that mean? Caleb lowered the rifle and turned to face her. It means we bought time. Not much, but some. They said they'd come back. They will. With more men. Probably. Elena felt the panic rising in her chest, threatening to choke her. Then what do we do? Caleb walked past her and set the rifle on the table. We get ready. Ready for what? A siege? We can't fight off a whole group of men. You got a better idea? Yes, we run. We leave now, tonight, before they come back. Caleb shook his head. Won't work. They'll track us. And out there, in the open, we're dead. So we just wait here to die? No. Caleb's voice was firm. We make them regret coming back. Elena stared at him, torn between terror and something that might have been hope. You're serious? As a grave? Why? The question burst out of her before she could stop it. Why are you doing this? You don't owe us anything. You could just tell us to leave. Wash your hands of the whole thing. Caleb met her eyes, and for a moment she saw past the hard exterior to something raw beneath. I told you, I couldn't walk away. That's not enough of a reason to die. Maybe not for you. Elena opened her mouth to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. This wasn't about logic. It wasn't about reason. It was about something deeper, something broken inside him that she didn't fully understand. Tommy tugged on her sleeve. Mama, I'm scared. Elena crouched down and pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. I know, baby, but we're safe. Caleb won't let anything happen to us. She looked up at Caleb as she said it, and saw something shift in his expression, a flicker of something vulnerable, quickly buried. Get some sleep, he said gruffly. All of you. I'll keep watch. You can't stay up all night. I've done worse. Elena wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her, making her limbs heavy. She guided the children back to the bedroom and tucked them in, whispering reassurances until they finally drifted off. When she came back out, Caleb was sitting by the window, rifle across his lap, staring into the darkness. She sat down across from him. I can take a shift. You need rest too. I'm fine. Caleb? He glanced at her, irritation flickering across his face. I said I'm fine. You're not invincible. Never said I was. They sat in tense silence, the fire crackling between them. Tell me about your family, Elena said quietly. Caleb's jaw tightened. No. Why not? Because it's done. Talking about it won't bring them back. Maybe not, but it might help. Help who? You. Caleb let out a bitter laugh. You think I need help? I think you're carrying something heavy, and I think you've been carrying it alone for too long. Caleb turned his gaze back to the window, his expression closing off. You don't know anything about me. I know you saved my children. I know you're willing to die for people you barely know. That tells me plenty. It tells you I'm a fool. No, Elena said softly. It tells me you're a good man. Caleb didn't respond. Just sat there, staring into the dark, his hands tight on the rifle. Elena stood and moved to the fire, adding another log. The flames leapt up, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Her name was Sarah, Caleb said suddenly. Elena turned, startled. Caleb wasn't looking at her. His gaze was fixed on something far away, something only he could see. My wife, Sarah, and our daughter was Caroline. She was 5. Elena sat back down, waiting. Storm came through in late November, worst I'd ever seen. I was out with the herd trying to get them to shelter. By the time I got back, He stopped, his voice catching. The cabin had collapsed. Roof caved in from the weight of the snow. I dug for hours, found them both. Elena's chest ached. I'm so sorry. I should have been here. Should have stayed with them. But I thought the herd was more important. Thought I had time. His hands clenched into fists. I was wrong. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? Caleb's voice was raw. I chose wrong. I put the damn animals ahead of my family, and they died because of it. You couldn't have known. Doesn't matter. They're still dead. Elena reached out and placed her hand over his, feeling the tension coiled in his muscles. You can't carry that forever. Watch me. Caleb, I don't want your pity, Elena, or your forgiveness. I just want... He trailed off, shaking his head. I don't know what I want anymore. Elena squeezed his hand. You want to make it right. That's why you're doing this. That's why you won't let those men take us. Caleb pulled his hand away, his expression hardening again. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just too stubborn to know when to quit. There's nothing wrong with that. There is if it gets you killed. Elena stood and looked down at him, her voice steady. Then we better make sure that doesn't happen. Caleb looked up at her, something like surprise crossing his face. Then he nodded, just once, and turned back to the window. Elena returned to the bedroom, but sleep didn't come easy. She lay awake, listening to the sounds of the night, wondering what tomorrow would bring. And somewhere deep in her chest, a small, fragile seed of hope began to take root. Because for the first time in longer than she could remember, she wasn't facing the darkness alone. The next morning came cold and clear. Elena woke to the smell of coffee and found Caleb still at his post, looking like he hadn't moved all night. Did you sleep at all? She asked. Some. It was a lie, but she didn't press. Instead, she started breakfast, moving quietly so as not to wake the children. Caleb stood and stretched, joints cracking. I need to check the perimeter. Make sure they didn't leave anyone watching. Is that likely? Don't know, but I'm not taking chances. He grabbed his coat and rifle. Keep the door locked. I'll be back in an hour. Elena nodded, anxiety tightening in her stomach. Be careful. Always am. He stepped outside and Elena locked the door behind him, then went to the window to watch him disappear into the tree line. Tommy emerged from the bedroom, rubbing his eyes. Where's Caleb? Just checking on things. He'll be back soon. Are those bad men coming back? Elena knelt down and took his hands. I don't know, sweetheart, but if they do, Caleb will protect us. What if there's too many of them? Then we'll figure it out. Together. Tommy didn't look convinced, but he nodded anyway. Okay. Lily appeared in the doorway, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit Elena had managed to save from their old life. The girl looked even smaller than usual, her eyes still heavy with sleep. Come eat, baby, Elena said, forcing warmth into her voice. They sat at the table, the three of them, and ate in silence. Elena tried to act normal, but her mind kept drifting to Caleb out there alone. To the men who would come back. To all the ways this could end badly. True to his word, Caleb returned within the hour. His expression was grim. Find anything? Elena asked. Tracks, 2 sets circling the property. They were watching last night. So they know we're still here. Yeah. When will they come back? Soon. Today. Maybe tomorrow. Caleb set his rifle down and poured himself coffee. We need to prepare. How? First, we secure the cabin. Board up the windows, reinforce the door, make it harder for them to get in. And then? Then we make sure we've got enough ammunition, enough food, enough water to outlast them. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. You really think it'll come to that? A siege? Better to be ready and wrong than the other way around. They spent the rest of the morning fortifying the cabin. Caleb pulled planks from the barn and nailed them across the windows, leaving small gaps to see and shoot through. Elena helped where she could, holding boards steady, handing him nails, keeping the children occupied. It felt surreal, preparing for battle in broad daylight, the sun shining cheerfully overhead as if the world wasn't about to collapse around them. By midday, the cabin looked more like a fortress. Caleb stepped back and surveyed their work, nodding in satisfaction. That'll slow them down, at least. Elena looked at the boarded windows, the barricaded door, and felt a wave of claustrophobia. We're trapped in here now. We were always trapped. Now we're just harder to kill. It wasn't comforting, but it was honest. That afternoon, Caleb sat the children down and spoke to them in a calm, measured tone. I need you both to listen very carefully. If bad men come, I need you to stay in the back room and be very, very quiet. Can you do that? Tommy nodded solemnly. Lily just stared, clutching her rabbit. Good. And if your mama tells you to run, you run. You don't ask questions, you don't look back. You just go. Understand? Where would we run to? Tommy asked. There's a root cellar behind the barn. You hide there until it's safe. What if it's never safe? Caleb's expression softened, just a fraction. It will be, I promise. Elena wasn't sure if he believed that, but it seemed to reassure Tommy, who nodded again. Lily tugged on Caleb's sleeve. Are you going to die? The bluntness of the question hung in the air like smoke. Caleb crouched down to her level. Not if I can help it. But you might. Maybe, but I'm pretty hard to kill. Lily considered this, then threw her arms around his neck. Caleb went rigid, clearly unprepared for the gesture. Then, slowly, awkwardly, he patted her back. It's okay, Lily whispered. I don't want you to die either. Something in Caleb's face cracked, just for a moment. Then he gently pulled away and stood. Go on now. Help your mama. The children scampered off, and Elena found herself blinking back tears. You're good with them, she said quietly. Caleb didn't respond, just turned and walked outside. Elena followed him, finding him standing in the yard, staring at the horizon. They're not your family, she said. I know, but you're treating them like they are. Caleb was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I couldn't save mine. Maybe I can save yours. Elena stepped closer, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the grief etched into the lines of his face. You already have, she said. Caleb turned to look at her, and for a brief, fragile moment, something passed between them. An understanding, a connection forged in shared pain and desperate hope. Then he looked away. We should get inside. It'll be dark soon. They returned to the cabin, and Elena helped him do a final check of their defenses. The rifle was loaded, extra ammunition within easy reach. The fire was banked low to avoid giving away their position. Everything that could be secured was secured. All they could do now was wait. Night fell slowly, the sky bruising from blue to purple to black. Elena sat with the children, reading them a story by the dim light of a single candle. Their eyes grew heavy, and one by one, they drifted off. Caleb remained at his post by the window, silent and watchful. Elena joined him, sitting close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. You should sleep, he said. So should you. I will. Later. You said that last night. And I meant it. Elena sighed. You're impossible. So I've been told. They sat in companionable silence, the darkness pressing in around them. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked. Stopping for us? Caleb considered the question. No. Even if it gets you killed? Even then. Why? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was rough with emotion. Because some things are worth dying for. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. We're not worth that. That's not your call to make. She wanted to argue, but the certainty in his voice stopped her. This man, this stranger who'd become their protector, had made his choice. And nothing she said would change it. Thank you, she whispered. Caleb glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Then he reached out and squeezed her hand just once before letting go. Get some rest, Elena. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. She nodded and returned to the bedroom, curling up beside her children. And as she closed her eyes, she sent a silent prayer into the darkness, not to any higher power, but to whatever force had brought them to this place, to this man. Please, let us survive this. The answer came with the dawn. Elena woke to the sound of hoofbeats, many of them, approaching fast. She bolted upright, her heart slamming into her throat. Caleb was already at the window, rifle ready. How many? She asked, her voice shaking. 6, maybe 7, more than before, enough to overwhelm them. Elena's hands trembled as she woke the children. Come on, babies. We need to go to the back room, right now. They didn't argue, sensing the urgency. She ushered them into the bedroom and shut the door, then returned to Caleb. What do we do? Same as before. We hold. Caleb, there's too many. I know. The hoofbeats stopped. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Then a voice rang out, different from before, older, harder. Caleb Rourke, we know you're in there. Caleb didn't respond. We're not here to negotiate. Send out the woman and the children, or we burn you out. Still, Caleb said nothing. You got 10 seconds, then we light it up. Elena's pulse roared in her ears. She looked at Caleb, desperate. We have to. No. Caleb. I said no. His voice was iron. Nobody's taking you. The voice outside began counting. 10, 9, 8. Elena felt like she was drowning. This was it. This was how it ended. 7, 6. Caleb raised the rifle, his finger on the trigger. 5, 4. Elena closed her eyes, bracing for the inevitable. 3, 2. And then a gunshot. But it didn't come from the cabin. It came from the ridge. Elena's eyes flew open. Through the gap in the boarded window, she saw one of the mounted men jerk sideways and topple from his horse, clutching his shoulder. Chaos erupted outside. Men shouted, horses screamed and scattered. Another shot cracked through the air, and a second rider went down. Caleb's face was stone, but his eyes tracked the movements with sharp precision. Someone's on the ridge. Who? Don't know. Don't care. He shifted his position, rifle still trained on the yard. But they just bought us time. The voice that had been counting roared now, furious and panicked. Find that shooter! Get him! 3 riders broke away, galloping toward the tree line where the shots had come from. The remaining men scrambled for cover behind water troughs and fence posts, their earlier confidence shattered. Another shot rang out, this one slamming into the ground inches from a man's boot. He yelped and dove behind the barn. That's some shooting, Caleb muttered, almost to himself. Friend of yours? Not that I know of. Elena pressed closer to the window, trying to see who was helping them, but the ridge was too far, the shooter hidden in the rocks and scrub. The leader's voice cut through the confusion. Rourke, call off your man! Caleb's jaw tightened. Not my man. Like hell. I got no idea who that is. But if I were you, I'd listen to what he's telling you. Another shot. This one took a man's hat clean off his head. He dropped to the ground, hands over his skull, cursing. The leader, a thick-built man with a graying beard, ducked behind his horse and shouted again. This isn't over, Rourke. Seems pretty over to me, Caleb called back. We'll be back. With more men, you hear me? More men. Bring 100. Won't change anything. The leader spat into the dirt, then gestured sharply to his remaining crew. Mount up. We're leaving. The men didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled onto their horses, some clutching wounds, others just pale with fear. Within moments, they were riding hard back the way they'd come, kicking up snow and dust in their wake. The yard fell silent. Elena sagged against the wall, her legs barely holding her. They're gone. For now. Caleb didn't lower his rifle. His gaze stayed fixed on the ridge. A figure emerged from the tree line, a man on foot, moving slow and easy, rifle slung over his shoulder. He was tall, lean, dressed in worn buckskin and a wide hat pulled low against the morning sun. Caleb tensed. Stay inside. Caleb, I mean it. Stay inside. He stepped out onto the porch, rifle ready but not raised. The stranger stopped about 20 yards out, hands visible, posture relaxed. That's far enough, Caleb said. The man nodded and came to a halt. Easy, friend. I'm not here to cause trouble. Then what are you here for? Same as you, looks like. Keeping those bastards from doing something they'd regret. Caleb studied him, eyes narrowed. Who are you? The man pushed his hat back, revealing a weathered face with sharp cheekbones and eyes the color of flint. Name's Jacob Mercer. Used to trap these mountains before they got too crowded. Don't recall asking for help, Mercer. Didn't figure you did. But I was passing through, saw what was shaping up, and thought I'd even the odds. Why? Jacob shrugged. Because I don't like bullies, and I really don't like men who threaten women and kids. Caleb's grip on the rifle loosened just slightly. You know those men? Know the type. Bounty hunters, most likely. Or worse. Jacob spat into the snow. Scum, either way. Elena couldn't help herself. She opened the door and stepped onto the porch, ignoring Caleb's sharp glance. Jacob's gaze shifted to her, and something in his expression softened. "Ma'am." "Thank you," Elena said, her voice tight, "for what you did." "No thanks needed, just doing what's right." Caleb stepped between them, his posture protective. "You planning to stick around, or was this a one-time thing?" Jacob considered. "Depends. You expecting more trouble?" "Yeah." "Then I'll stick around. Got nowhere pressing to be." Caleb's jaw worked, clearly torn. Finally, he lowered the rifle completely. "All right, but you try anything. You'll shoot me." "I get it." Jacob grinned, a crooked, easy smile. "Don't worry, I'm not stupid." Caleb gestured toward the cabin. "Come on then. Might as well get you some coffee before those bastards regroup." Jacob followed them inside, ducking slightly to clear the doorframe. He took in the boarded windows, the fortified door, the stacked ammunition, and let out a low whistle. "You weren't kidding about expecting trouble." "Never do." Caleb poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to Jacob. "How long you been watching?" "Since yesterday. Saw those men ride up the first time, figured something wasn't sitting right, so I camped on the ridge and kept an eye out." "You didn't have to do that." "Maybe not, but I did anyway." Jacob took a sip of coffee and grimaced. "Damn, Rourke. You make terrible coffee." Despite everything, Elena felt a smile tug at her lips. There was something disarming about this man, something that cut through the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. Caleb didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth twitched. "You don't like it? You can make your own." "Might just do that." Jacob set the cup down and turned to Elena. "I didn't catch your name, ma'am." "Elena. Elena Voss." Recognition flickered in Jacob's eyes. "Voss, that the name those men were using?" Elena's stomach clenched. "Yes." "Thought so. They're saying you kidnapped your own kids." "It's a lie." "Figured as much. You don't look like a kidnapper. You look like someone running from something worse." Elena's throat tightened. "I am." Jacob nodded, no judgment in his expression. "Well, you picked a good man to run to. Caleb's stubborn as hell, but he's solid." "You two know each other?" Elena asked. "Not well. Met once, maybe twice, at a trading post up north. But reputation travels. Rourke's known for keeping his word." Caleb looked uncomfortable with the praise. "That's enough." "Just telling the truth." The bedroom door creaked open, and Tommy peered out, eyes wide. "Mama? Is it safe?" Elena crossed to him and pulled him close. "Yes, baby, it's safe. For now." Lily appeared behind him, still clutching her rabbit. She looked at Jacob with open curiosity. Jacob crouched down to her level, his expression gentle. "Hey there, little miss. That's a fine rabbit you got." Lily hugged the toy tighter but didn't retreat. "His name is Clover." "Clover, that's a good name." Jacob stood and looked at Caleb. "You got a plan for what comes next?" "Working on it. Those men won't stay gone long. They'll bring reinforcements, maybe the law if they can twist things right." "I know." "So what are you thinking?" Caleb rubbed the back of his neck, frustration etched into his features. "I'm thinking we can't stay here forever, but if we run, they'll track us." "Not if you know where to go." Jacob's eyes glinted. "I know these mountains better than anyone. There's places they'd never find you. Caves, old trapper routes, hidden valleys." Elena's pulse quickened. "You'd help us." "Why not? Like I said, I don't like bullies." Caleb crossed his arms. "What's in it for you?" Jacob shrugged. "Company. Gets lonely up here in the winter. Besides, I got a feeling this is going to get interesting." "Interesting isn't the word I'd use." "Fair enough. But the offer stands. You want out of here? I can get you out." Caleb looked at Elena, something unspoken passing between them. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the part of him that wanted to solve this alone, and the part that knew he couldn't. "Let me think on it," Caleb said finally. Jacob nodded. "Take your time, but not too much. Those men will be back by nightfall, if I'm guessing right." The rest of the morning passed in uneasy preparation. Jacob proved himself useful, helping Caleb reinforce weak points in their defenses and sharing what he knew about the men they were facing. The leader, big guy with the beard, that's Marcus Finch. He's got a reputation for taking bounties nobody else will touch. Doesn't care much about the law, just the money. How many men can he pull together? Caleb asked. 10, maybe 15 if he's got the coin. Most of them won't be worth much in a fight, but numbers matter. Caleb's expression darkened. That's too many. Which is why running starts to look smarter. Elena listened from across the room, her mind spinning. Running meant leaving behind the first real safety they'd found, but staying meant risking everything in a fight they might not win. Tommy sat beside her, unusually quiet. She put a hand on his shoulder. You okay, sweetheart? Are we going to leave? I don't know yet. I like it here. Elena's chest tightened. I know. And I like Caleb. He's nice. She looked over at Caleb, who was deep in conversation with Jacob, his face set in hard lines. Nice wasn't the word she'd use, but protective, reliable, decent. Those fit. Yeah, she said softly. He is. That afternoon, Jacob went back to the ridge to keep watch while Caleb worked on building additional barricades. Elena helped where she could, but her thoughts kept drifting to Bichitu, to the impossible choice ahead of them. Caleb caught her staring and paused, hammer in hand. What? I was just thinking. About? About what happens if we leave. You'd come with us, right? Caleb set the hammer down. Where else would I go? This is your home, your land, everything you built. It's just wood and dirt, Elena. It's not worth dying for. But it's yours. So? He looked at her, his gaze steady. You think I care more about a piece of land than keeping you safe? Elena's breath caught. The simplicity of the statement, the conviction behind it, hit her harder than she expected. I just don't want you to lose everything because of us. I already lost everything once. This time I'm choosing what matters. Before she could respond, Jacob's voice rang out from the ridge. Riders coming! From the east! Caleb grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. Elena's heart slammed into her throat. How many? Caleb shouted back. 4! No, 5! Caleb cursed under his breath. They're regrouping faster than I thought. Elena rushed to the bedroom and gathered the children. Back room, now, just like before. They obeyed without question, too scared to argue. Elena returned to Caleb's side, her hands shaking. What do we do? We hold. Again. Caleb, if they... I said we hold. The riders came into view, moving fast. But as they got closer, Elena realized something was off. These weren't the same men. Their clothes were different, their horses fresher. Jacob appeared at the door, breathing hard from his sprint down the ridge. They're not Finch's crew. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Then who are they? The rider stopped at the edge of the property, hands raised in a gesture of peace. The lead rider, a middle-aged man with a sheriff's star pinned to his coat, called out, Caleb Rourke! We need to talk! Caleb's grip on the rifle tightened. Nothing to talk about, Sheriff. I think there is. Can I approach? Caleb glanced at Jacob, who shrugged. Your call. After a tense moment, Caleb lowered the rifle slightly. Come ahead, but slow. The sheriff dismounted and walked forward, hands still visible. He stopped a respectful distance from the porch. Caleb, it's been a while. Not long enough, Garrett. Sheriff Garrett smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Fair. Look, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to know what's going on. Why? Because I got men from 3 towns reporting that a woman and 2 children are being harbored here against their will. That true? Elena stepped forward before Caleb could answer. That's a lie. Garrett's gaze shifted to her. You Elena Voss? Yes. These your children? Yes. Then why are men claiming you kidnapped them? Because my husband paid them to. The words came out sharp, bitter. He wants me back, not because he loves me, because I'm his property, and he'll say anything to get me. Garrett's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. You got proof of that? Proof? Elena's voice cracked. What proof do I need? I'm their mother. That's not how the law works, ma'am. Caleb stepped forward, his voice cold. So you're here to take them. I'm here to sort out the truth. And if the truth is she's running from a bastard who beats her, Garrett's jaw tightened, then I need more than her word. You need more than... Caleb's voice rose, but Jacob put a hand on his shoulder. Easy, Jacob said quietly. Garrett looked between them, then sighed. Look, I don't like this any more than you do, but I got a writ here, signed by a judge, saying those children need to be returned to their legal guardian. If you got evidence that says otherwise, I'll listen, but without it, my hands are tied. Elena felt the ground tilt beneath her. So that's it? You just hand us over? I don't want to, but the law's the law. The law's a joke, Caleb spat. And you know it. Garrett's face hardened. Maybe. But it's all we got. And if I don't follow it, someone else will. Someone worse. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Then Jacob spoke up. What if there was another way? Garrett turned to him. Who are you? Someone with a suggestion. You got that writ. Fine. But it takes time to execute, doesn't it? Paperwork, transport, all that official business. What are you getting at? I'm saying, what if you gave them a few days? Time to gather their own evidence, maybe contact someone who can vouch for them. You'd still be following the law, just slowly. Garrett's eyes narrowed. You asking me to delay? I'm asking you to be thorough. The sheriff considered this, his gaze moving from Jacob to Caleb to Elena. Finally, he nodded, slow and deliberate. 3 days. That's all I can give you. After that, I have to act. Understand? Caleb's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Garrett looked at Elena. 3 days, ma'am. Use them wisely. He turned and walked back to his horse, mounting in one smooth motion. The other riders followed his lead, and within moments they were gone. Elena's legs gave out. She sank onto the porch steps, her whole body shaking. 3 days, she whispered. What are we supposed to do in 3 days? Caleb sat beside her, his voice grim. Figure out a way to prove your husband's a bastard, or disappear so well they never find you. How do we prove something like that? He's careful. He never leaves marks where people can see. Jacob leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Then we go with option 2, you disappear. Elena looked up at him. You said you knew places. I do. Deep in the mountains where nobody goes. You could stay there until this blows over. And what if it never blows over? Then you start a new life. New names. New story. People do it all the time. Caleb shook his head. That's not a life. That's just running. Sometimes running's all you got, Jacob said quietly. Elena buried her face in her hands. Every option felt impossible. Every path led to loss. Caleb's hand found hers, rough and warm and steady. We'll figure it out, I promise. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of the world was pressing down and she didn't know how much more she could carry. That night, the 4 of them sat around the fire. Caleb, Elena, Jacob, and the children. The mood was somber, the future uncertain. Jacob tried to lighten things with stories from his trapping days, tales of near disasters and close calls that made Tommy's eyes go wide. Even Lily smiled, just a little, but Elena couldn't shake the dread coiling in her stomach. When the children finally fell asleep, she stepped outside for air. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered across the sky like broken glass. Caleb found her there, standing in the yard, arms wrapped around herself. You should get some rest, he said. Can't. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. We'll get through this. You don't know that. I do. Elena turned to look at him, searching his face in the moonlight. Why are you so sure? Because I won't let it go any other way. The certainty in his voice was almost painful. This man, who owed her nothing, who'd already lost everything once, he was willing to fight for her children, for a future he had no guarantee of seeing. I don't deserve this, she whispered. That's not for you to decide. Caleb, he cut her off, his voice rough. You asked me once why I'm doing this. The truth is, I don't know if I can explain it. All I know is that when I saw you on that ridge, freezing and desperate, I saw a second chance. Not for you, for me. A chance to do something right, to save someone when it matters. And I'm not walking away from that, not for anything. Elena's vision blurred. What if we can't win? Then we go down fighting. She let out a shaky laugh. That's not comforting. It's honest. They stood in silence, the cold biting at their skin, the weight of tomorrow pressing down. Finally, Caleb spoke again, softer this time. You know, Sarah used to say I was too stubborn for my own good, that I'd fight a losing battle just because I couldn't stand to quit. Was she right? Probably. Elena smiled despite herself. I think I would have liked her. She would have liked you too. Something shifted between them then, a fragile understanding that went beyond words. They were both broken, both carrying grief too heavy to name, but in this moment, standing under the stars with the world falling apart around them, they weren't alone. And that, Elena realized, was worth fighting for. 3 days, she said. 3 days, Caleb echoed. Then we make a choice. Yeah. Elena took a breath, steadying herself. All right, let's make them count. They went back inside where Jacob was banking the fire and checking the locks. We need a plan, Elena said. Jacob looked up. I'm listening. If we're going to run, we need to do it smart. We need supplies, a route, and a way to cover our tracks. I can handle the route, Jacob said. And I know where we can stash supplies along the way. Caleb nodded. I'll gather what we need. Food, blankets, ammunition. And what about me? Elena asked. Caleb met her eyes. You keep the kids ready, and you stay strong, because once we start this, there's no turning back. Elena nodded, her resolve hardening. I can do that. They spent the next hour planning, mapping out routes and contingencies, preparing for every possible scenario. It felt surreal, plotting an escape like criminals. But Elena pushed the fear aside. This was survival, and she'd do whatever it took. When they finally stopped, exhaustion pulling at them, Jacob stood and stretched. I'll take first watch. You two get some sleep. Caleb didn't argue. He was too tired to fight it. Elena returned to the bedroom, where Tommy and Lily slept peacefully, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. She lay down between them, pulling them close, and tried to quiet her racing mind. Tomorrow, they'd start preparing. In 3 days, they'd either be free or captured. And somewhere in between, Elena would have to decide if she was ready to trust Caleb with not just her life, but her future. Because the man who'd saved them from the blizzard was offering something more than shelter now. He was offering a chance to stop running, and that terrified her more than anything. The first day of their 3-day countdown started before dawn. Elena woke to the sound of Caleb and Jacob moving through the cabin, their voices low and purposeful. She slipped out of bed carefully, trying not to wake the children, and found both men loading packs with supplies. You're starting early, she said. Caleb glanced up. Can't afford to waste time. Jacob was rolling blankets tight, securing them with leather straps. We're splitting the supplies into 3 packs, 1 for each adult. If we get separated, everyone has what they need to survive. The practicality of it hit Elena hard. They were preparing for the worst. What can I do? She asked. Sort through the food, Caleb said, gesturing to a pile on the table. Anything that'll keep? Dried meat, hardtack, beans, leave the rest. Elena set to work, her hands moving automatically while her mind churned. 3 days felt like both too much time and not enough. Every minute that passed brought them closer to a decision that would change everything. By mid-morning, they had 3 packs ready, each loaded with enough supplies to last a week in the wilderness. Caleb added ammunition to his pack, Jacob added rope and snares to his, and Elena tucked in extra clothes for the children. Tommy wandered out of the bedroom, rubbing sleep from his eyes. What are you doing? Just getting ready, Elena said, forcing brightness into her voice. In case we need to take a trip. Where? We'll see. Tommy looked at the packs, then at Caleb, his young face serious beyond his years. Are the bad men coming back? Caleb crouched down to his level. Maybe, but if they do, we'll be ready. What if there's too many? Then we leave, and we don't look back. Tommy considered this, then nodded. Okay. Lily appeared in the doorway, clutching Clover. She looked smaller than ever, her hair tangled from sleep, her eyes uncertain. Elena went to her and smoothed her hair. Good morning, baby. I'm hungry. I'll make you something. Come on. While Elena cooked breakfast, Jacob stepped outside to scout the perimeter again. Caleb remained at the window, his rifle never far from reach. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to choke on. They ate in near silence, the weight of unspoken fears pressing down on all of them. Even the children seemed to sense it, picking at their food instead of devouring it like usual. Jacob returned just as they were finishing, his expression grim. We got tracks, fresh ones. Someone was watching the property last night. Caleb's jaw tightened. How close? Close enough to see the cabin. They didn't approach, just observed. Finch? Can't say for sure, but whoever it was, they know we're still here. Elena's stomach twisted. So they're planning something. Most likely. Jacob poured himself coffee. Question is what and when? Caleb stood and paced, his mind clearly working through scenarios. They'll want to wait until we're vulnerable, catch us off guard. Or they'll wait until the sheriff's deadline passes, Jacob added. Let the law do their work for them. Either way, we can't stay here much longer. Elena set down her fork, her appetite gone. So we leave early, tonight, maybe. Caleb shook his head. Not yet. We leave too soon. We lose the advantage of knowing the terrain. We need daylight to navigate the first stretch. But if they attack before then we fight. Caleb's tone left no room for argument. But I'd rather avoid that if we can. Jacob leaned against the wall, arms crossed. There's another option. We could split up. Both Caleb and Elena turned to stare at him. Hear me out, Jacob continued. If they're watching, they're tracking all of us. But if I lead them one direction while you take Elena and the kids another, we divide their attention, maybe lose them completely. That's suicide, Caleb said flatly. Not if I'm smart about it. I know these mountains. I can lead them on a chase they'll never recover from. And if they catch you? Jacob shrugged. Then I talk my way out, or I don't, but at least you'd have a chance. Caleb's expression darkened. I'm not asking you to sacrifice yourself for us. You're not asking, I'm offering. Elena looked between them, torn. The idea of splitting up terrified her, but Jacob's logic was sound. If they stayed together, they were a bigger target. Divided, they might have a chance. No, Caleb said, his voice hard. We stick together, all of us. Jacob studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Your call. The rest of the day passed in tense preparation. Caleb taught Elena how to load and fire his spare rifle, his hands guiding hers through the motions until she could do it without thinking. She wasn't a great shot, but she was good enough to be dangerous at close range. Jacob worked with Tommy, showing him how to start a fire with flint and steel, how to find water, how to stay quiet in the woods. The boy absorbed it all with the seriousness of someone much older. Lily stayed close to Elena, sensing that something big was coming, but not understanding what. Elena kept her busy with small tasks, folding clothes, organizing supplies, anything to keep her mind occupied. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Caleb called them all together. We leave at first light, he said. Jacob will lead. I'll bring up the rear. Elena, you stay in the middle with the kids. We move fast, we move quiet, and we don't stop unless I say so. Understood? Everyone nodded. Once we're in the mountains, we'll be harder to track. But that first stretch, from here to the tree line, that's where we're most exposed. So we need to be smart. What if we run into trouble? Elena asked. Then you take the kids and run. Don't wait for me. Don't look back. Just run. Caleb, I mean it, Elena. Your job is to keep them safe. Mine is to make sure you get the chance. She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. He'd already made up his mind, and nothing she said would change it. That night, sleep was impossible. Elena lay awake, listening to the sounds of the cabin, the crackle of the dying fire, the wind rattling the boarded windows, Caleb's footsteps as he paced near the door. She finally gave up and joined him, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. Can't sleep? He asked. No. You? Haven't slept well in years. They stood together in the darkness, the silence between them comfortable now, familiar. Are you scared? Elena asked quietly. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Yeah. The honesty surprised her. You don't seem like someone who gets scared. Everyone gets scared. It's what you do with it that matters. Elena pulled the blanket tighter. I keep thinking about what happens if we don't make it, if they catch us. Don't think about that. How can I not? Caleb turned to face her, his expression serious. Because thinking about it won't change anything. All you can do is focus on the next step. And the step after that, you keep moving until you can't anymore. Is that what you did? After you lost your family? His jaw tightened. Yeah, I kept moving, kept working, kept breathing, even when I didn't want to. What made you want to again? Caleb looked away, his voice dropping. I don't know if I ever did. Not really. Not until you showed up. Elena's breath caught. Caleb, I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty. I'm saying it because it's true. You gave me something to fight for again, something that matters, and I'm not letting that go. Tears pricked Elena's eyes. She reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses, the scars, the strength in his grip. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For choosing us. Caleb's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it nearly broke her. Wasn't a choice. Not really. They stood like that for a long time, hands clasped, neither willing to let go. Finally, Caleb spoke again. You should try to rest. Tomorrow's going to be hard. Elena nodded, but she didn't move. Will you be okay out here? I'll manage. Caleb, go, Elena, please. She wanted to stay, wanted to sit beside him and keep the darkness at bay, but she knew he needed the solitude, needed the space to prepare himself for what was coming. So she went back to the bedroom where her children slept and lay down beside them. And for the first time in months, she let herself imagine a future where they weren't running, where they had a home, where they were safe. It felt impossible, but so had surviving this long. Dawn came cold and gray. Elena woke to Caleb's hand on her shoulder, his voice low. Time to go. She sat up, her heart already pounding. The children stirred and she roused them gently, helping them dress in layers against the cold. In the main room, Jacob was already packed, his rifle slung across his back. Caleb handed Elena her pack, then helped Tommy with his. Everyone ready? Caleb asked. Nods all around. Then let's move. They stepped outside into the pre-dawn light, the world still and silent. Elena's breath misted in the air as she adjusted her pack, feeling the weight of everything they were leaving behind. Caleb locked the cabin door, then turned to look at it one last time. Elena saw something cross his face. Grief, maybe, or resignation. But it was gone in an instant. This way, Jacob said, leading them toward the tree line. They moved in single file, their footsteps crunching in the snow. Elena kept Tommy and Lily close, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. The first mile was agonizing. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed like a threat. But they pressed on, following Jacob through the trees, climbing higher into the mountains. By mid-morning, they'd reached the first ridge. Jacob called a halt, and they crouched behind a cluster of rocks to rest. See anything? Caleb asked. Jacob scanned the valley below with a small spyglass. No, not yet. That doesn't mean they're not there. I know. Elena pulled out water and passed it to the children. Tommy drank greedily, but Lily just held the canteen, staring back the way they'd come. You okay, baby? Elena asked. Lily looked up at her, eyes wide. Are we ever going back? The question hit Elena like a punch. She glanced at Caleb, who was watching them with an unreadable expression. I don't know, Elena said honestly. Maybe someday. I liked it there. I know. Lily leaned against her, and Elena wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. After a few minutes, Jacob stood. We should keep moving. There's a pass about 3 miles ahead. Once we're through, it'll be harder for them to follow. They started again, the terrain growing steeper and more treacherous. Elena's legs burned, her lungs screaming for air in the thin mountain atmosphere. But she didn't complain, didn't slow down. Tommy struggled too, his small legs working twice as hard to keep up. Caleb noticed and scooped him up without a word, carrying him on his shoulders. I can walk, Tommy protested weakly. I know, but this is faster. The boy didn't argue, just held on tight, his face buried in Caleb's coat. They reached the pass just as the sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the snow. Jacob led them through a narrow gap between 2 towering rock faces, the walls so close Elena could touch both sides at once. On the other side, the landscape opened up into a vast, pristine valley. Trees stretched as far as the eye could see, their branches heavy with snow. This is it, Jacob said. Once we're in those trees, tracking us becomes damn near impossible. Hope flared in Elena's chest. So we're safe. Safer. Not safe. There's a difference. They descended into the valley, the snow deeper here, the going slower. But Elena felt lighter, the weight of fear easing just slightly. They stopped for lunch in a small clearing, huddling around a fire Jacob built with practiced efficiency. The warmth felt like a gift. Lily and Tommy sat close to the flames, their cheeks pink from the cold. Elena handed out dried meat and hardtack, and they ate in silence, too tired to talk. Caleb sat apart, his gaze fixed on the past behind them, ever watchful. Jacob joined Elena, his voice low. He's not going to relax until we're 100 miles from here. Can you blame him? No, but he needs to pace himself. This kind of vigilance, it burns you out fast. Elena looked at Caleb, seeing the tension in his shoulders, the lines of exhaustion etched into his face. He's been like this since the day we met. That's what happens when you lose everything. You spend the rest of your life waiting for the next blow. Is that what you do? Jacob smiled, a sad, crooked thing. Sometimes, but I've learned to let go a little. Caleb hasn't figured that out yet. Elena didn't respond, her gaze still on Caleb. She wanted to go to him, to tell him it was okay to rest, but she knew he wouldn't listen. After lunch, they pressed on, moving deeper into the wilderness. The terrain grew rougher, the trails less defined, but Jacob navigated it all with ease, his knowledge of the land evident in every step. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Jacob led them to a small cave tucked into the side of a hill. "We'll camp here tonight," he said. "It's sheltered, and there's only one way in, easy to defend." Caleb inspected the cave, then nodded his approval. "Good choice." They settled in, spreading blankets on the cold stone floor. Jacob built another fire near the entrance, and the warmth slowly filled the space. Elena helped the children get comfortable, tucking them in and whispering reassurances. They fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the long day. Caleb sat near the fire, cleaning his rifle. Jacob joined him, and the two men talked in low voices, planning the next day's route. Elena listened, her mind drifting. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to relax. Just a little. But then Caleb stiffened, his hand going to his rifle. "What is it?" Jacob asked. "Thought I heard something." They all fell silent, listening. At first there was nothing, then, faint but unmistakable, hoofbeats. Elena's blood turned to ice. "They found us." Caleb was already on his feet, moving to the cave entrance. "How many?" Jacob joined him, peering into the darkness. "Can't tell, but they're close." "Wake the kids," Caleb said to Elena. "We need to move, now." Elena's hands shook as she roused Tommy and Lily, pulling them to their feet. They were groggy, confused, but she didn't have time to explain. "Pack everything," Caleb ordered. "Fast." They worked in frantic silence, stuffing supplies back into packs, dousing the fire. The hoofbeats grew louder, closer. "They're coming up the hill," Jacob said, his voice tight. Caleb cursed. "There's no other way out?" "Not from here." "Then we make a stand." Elena's heart stopped. "Caleb, we don't have a choice." He turned to Jacob. "You take Elena and the kids. Get them out through the back if you can." "There is no back." "Then make one." Caleb's voice was raw. "I'll hold them off. Buy you time." "That's suicide." "It's the only option we've got." Jacob grabbed Caleb's arm. "You do this. You die." "I know." "Then don't do it." Caleb pulled free, his expression hard. "Take care of them, Jacob. That's all I'm asking." Before anyone could respond, the first rider appeared at the base of the hill, a torch held high. Caleb raised his rifle. "Get behind me, all of you." Elena's mind screamed at her to do something, to stop this, but her body wouldn't move. The rider called out, his voice carrying through the night. "Caleb Rourke, we know you're in there. Send out the woman and the children, and we'll let you live." Caleb didn't answer, just took aim. "Last chance, Rourke." Still, nothing. The rider cursed and gestured to the others. "Flush them out." More torches appeared, moving up the hill in a semicircle. Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. And then, a voice Elena hadn't expected cut through the night. "Caleb, don't shoot. It's Garrett." Caleb hesitated, his rifle still raised. The sheriff rode forward, hands raised, torch casting flickering light across his weathered face. "I'm alone." "Well, not alone, but we're not here to hurt you." "Then what the hell are you doing here?" Caleb demanded. Garrett dismounted and approached slowly. "I got new information about Elena's husband. Turns out he's got a warrant out for fraud and assault back east. The judge who signed that writ? He's under investigation for taking bribes. Elena's knees went weak. What? You're saying the writ's no good? Jacob asked. I'm saying the whole thing's a sham. Richard Voss is a wanted man. And those bounty hunters, they're working for him illegally. Garrett looked at Elena. You're free, ma'am. You and your children. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The words didn't make sense. Caleb lowered his rifle slowly. You're sure? Positive. I got the paperwork right here. Garrett pulled a folded document from his coat. It's over. Elena felt her legs give out. Caleb caught her before she hit the ground, his arms strong and steady around her. It's over, he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. You hear me, Elena? It's over. She clung to him, sobs tearing from her chest, relief, disbelief, overwhelming gratitude all crashing together. Tommy and Lily rushed forward, wrapping their arms around both of them, and for a moment they just held each other, a tangle of limbs and tears and laughter. Jacob stood back, a smile breaking across his face. Well, I'll be damned. Garrett cleared his throat. I hate to break this up, but those bounty hunters, they're still out there, and they're not going to care about warrants or writs. You need to come back to town. Get this sorted officially. Caleb looked at Elena, and she saw the question in his eyes. She nodded. Okay, we'll go. Good. Garrett mounted his horse. I've got men stationed at the ranch. We'll escort you back at first light. As the sheriff rode away, Elena turned to Caleb, her hands still shaking. Is this real? She whispered. Yeah, it's real. We're safe. You're safe. She let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for months. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Caleb's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear. Just breathe. So she did. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, the weight on her chest lifted. They were free. They returned to the ranch at dawn, riding in a column with Sheriff Garrett's men flanking them on all sides. Elena sat in front of Caleb on his horse. Tommy and Lily nestled between them, while Jacob rode beside them with that easy confidence he seemed to carry everywhere. The ride back felt different than the desperate flight into the mountains. The sun was brighter, the air cleaner, and for the first time since Elena could remember, the future didn't feel like a threat waiting to pounce. But freedom, she was learning, didn't erase fear overnight. It just gave you room to breathe while you figured out what came next. When they crested the final ridge and the ranch came into view, Elena felt something twist in her chest. The cabin looked smaller than she remembered, more vulnerable. The boarded windows and reinforced door reminded her of just how close they'd come to losing everything. Caleb must have felt her tense because his arm tightened around her waist. You all right? Yeah, just strange being back. We don't have to stay if you don't want to. Elena looked up at him, surprised. Where else would we go? Caleb didn't answer, but something in his expression shifted, like he'd been bracing for her to run and was caught off guard that she hadn't. They dismounted in the yard and Garrett's men spread out to check the property. Within minutes, they'd cleared the area and given the all clear. Looks like your unwanted visitors moved on, Garrett said, tipping his hat. But I'll leave 2 men here for the next few days, just to be safe. Appreciate it, Caleb said. Garrett turned to Elena. Ma'am, when you're ready, I'll need you to come into town, sign some papers, give a statement. Nothing complicated, just making it official. Elena nodded. How long do I have? Couple days, no rush. He paused, his expression softening. For what it's worth, I'm sorry it took me so long to figure out what was really going on. Should have dug deeper from the start. You did what you could with what you knew, Elena said quietly. That's more than most people would have done. Garrett looked like he wanted to say more, but just nodded and mounted his horse. Take care of yourself, Mrs. Voss. It's just Elena. I'm done being a Voss. The sheriff smiled. Fair enough. Take care, Elena. He rode off with most of his men, leaving 2 behind to stand watch. They posted themselves at opposite ends of the property, far enough away to give privacy, but close enough to respond if trouble came. Jacob helped Caleb remove the boards from the windows, while Elena got the children settled inside. The cabin felt cold and empty after being abandoned, but it was still standing, still theirs. She built a fire while Caleb and Jacob worked, the familiar task grounding her. By the time the windows were clear and the door unbarred, warmth had begun to seep back into the space. Tommy and Lily sat by the fire, exhaustion finally catching up to them. They'd been so brave, so strong throughout everything, but now that the danger had passed, they looked like what they were. Two small children who'd been asked to carry too much. Elena sat between them and pulled them close. "You two okay?" Tommy nodded, but his eyes were far away. "Is it really over, Mama?" "Yeah, baby, it's really over." "So the bad men aren't coming back?" "No, they're not." Lily looked up at her, clutching Clover tight. "And we can stay here with Caleb?" The question hung in the air, simple but loaded with everything Elena hadn't let herself think about. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. We'll figure it out." Lily's face fell, and guilt twisted in Elena's stomach. But she couldn't make promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Not yet. Caleb and Jacob came back inside, stamping snow from their boots. Jacob stretched and grinned. "Well, that's my cue. You folks need some space to sort yourselves out." "You're leaving?" Tommy asked, his voice small. Jacob crouched down in front of him. "Just for a bit. Got some traps to check, some camps to visit. But I'll be around. And if you ever need me, you just ask Caleb. He knows how to find me." Tommy nodded, trying to look brave. Jacob ruffled his hair, then stood and moved to Lily. "You take care of that rabbit, you hear me?" Lily hugged Clover tighter and nodded. Jacob straightened and looked at Elena. "You've got good kids, strong kids. You did right by them." Elena's throat tightened. "Thank you for everything." "Don't mention it." He turned to Caleb and extended his hand. "You did good, Rourke, real good." Caleb shook his hand, his grip firm. "Couldn't have done it without you." "Maybe. But you would have tried," Jacob smiled. "That's the difference between you and most men. You don't quit. Stubbornness isn't always a virtue. It is when it saves lives." They stood there for a moment, two men who'd become unlikely allies, and then Jacob stepped back and tipped his hat. "I'll see you around." He left without ceremony, the way he'd arrived, and the cabin suddenly felt quieter, emptier. Elena looked at Caleb, who was staring at the closed door like he was trying to figure out what to do with his hands. "I should get dinner started," she said, breaking the silence. "I can do it." "Caleb, you've been doing everything. Let me help." He opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. "All right." They worked side by side in the small kitchen, falling into an easy rhythm. Elena peeled potatoes while Caleb cut meat, their movements synchronized in a way that felt natural, comfortable. The children dozed by the fire, their exhaustion finally winning out. Elena glanced at them and felt her chest tighten. They looked so peaceful, so safe. "They're good kids," Caleb said quietly, following her gaze. "Yeah, they are. You raised them well." Elena let out a bitter laugh. "I don't know about that. I dragged them across half the country in the middle of winter with no plan and no resources. I almost got them killed. But you didn't. You got them out. You kept them alive. That counts for something." Elena set down the knife and turned to face him. "I couldn't have done it without you. You know that, right? If you hadn't stopped that day, if you just kept riding, we'd be dead." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I couldn't keep riding." "Why not?" He was quiet for a long time, his hands stilling on the cutting board. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "Because 7 years ago, someone stopped for me. After I lost Sarah and Caroline, after I dug them out of the snow and buried them, I didn't want to keep going. I walked into the storm planning not to come back. And then this old trapper, never even got his name. He found me half frozen and dragged me to his camp. Kept me alive even when I didn't want to be. Told me that grief doesn't give you the right to quit. That as long as you're breathing, you owe it to the people who aren't to keep moving forward." Elena's breath caught. "What happened to him?" "Don't know. He left the next morning. Never saw him again." Caleb looked at her, his eyes dark with pain and something else. Something like hope. "But I never forgot what he said. And when I saw you on that ridge, freezing and desperate, I heard his voice in my head, telling me I didn't get to walk away. Not again." Elena reached out and took his hand, feeling the tremor in his fingers. "I'm glad you stopped." "Me too." They stood like that, hands clasped, the silence between them heavy with unspoken things. Finally, Elena squeezed his hand and let go. "We should finish dinner." "Yeah." They ate together as the last light faded from the sky, the fire casting warm shadows on the walls. The children woke long enough to eat, then fell asleep again, this time in the bedroom with the door cracked open. Elena cleaned up while Caleb checked the locks and secured the cabin for the night. When she finished, she found him sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. She sat beside him. "What happens now?" Caleb glanced at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean with us, with this. Do we just go back to how things were before?" "I don't think we can. Too much has changed." "I know, but I don't know what comes next." Caleb was quiet, his gaze returning to the fire. "You're free now. The law's on your side. You could go anywhere, start over somewhere new, somewhere without all the bad memories." Elena's stomach clenched. "Is that what you want? For us to leave?" "What I want doesn't matter." "Yes, it does." Caleb turned to face her, and she saw the conflict written across his features. "Elena, I'm not going to ask you to stay just because I want you to. You've spent your whole life being told what to do by a man who didn't deserve you. I'm not going to be another chain around your neck. You're not a chain. You're the reason I'm free. Then use that freedom. Take your kids and build the life you want. You don't owe me anything." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "What if I want to stay?" Caleb's expression cracked. "Don't say that unless you mean it." "I mean it." She reached out and cupped his face, feeling the rough stubble under her palm. "Caleb, I've been running for so long, I forgot what it felt like to have a home. But this place, being here with you, it feels like the first real home I've had in years, maybe ever, and I don't want to walk away from that, not unless you want me to." "I don't." The words came out rough, almost broken. "I don't want you to leave, but I need you to be sure. Because if you stay, I'm all in. I'll protect those kids like they're my own. I'll stand by you no matter what comes. But I need to know that's what you want, that you're choosing this, choosing me. Not because you're grateful or because you feel like you owe me, but because it's what you actually want." Elena's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. "I'm choosing you. Not because I owe you, not because I'm grateful, though I am. I'm choosing you because when I look at you, I see someone who understands what it means to lose everything and keep going anyway. Someone who's broken but still fights for what matters. And I want to build something with you, something real, something that lasts." Caleb's hands came up to cover hers, his eyes searching her face like he was trying to memorize every detail. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, and she buried her face in his chest, feeling his heartbeat against her cheek. They held each other like that, two people who'd been shattered and were now trying to figure out how to fit their broken pieces together. When they finally pulled apart, Caleb's eyes were wet, though he'd die before admitting it. "We'll take it slow," he said. "Figure things out as we go." "That sounds perfect." They sat by the fire until it burned down to embers, talking quietly about everything and nothing. For the first time, Elena let herself imagine a future that didn't involve running, a future where her children could grow up safe and loved, where she could wake up each morning without fear. It wouldn't be easy. There would be hard days ahead, scars that took time to heal, trust that needed to be rebuilt brick by brick. But they had time now. They had a chance, and that was more than she'd ever dared to hope for. The next morning, Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee. She found Caleb in the kitchen cooking breakfast, while Tommy helped him set the table. "Good morning," she said, surprised. Tommy beamed at her. "Caleb's teaching me to make pancakes." "Is that so?" Caleb glanced over his shoulder, a small smile tugging at his lips. Figured it was about time he learned. Lily appeared from the bedroom, rubbing her eyes. Elena scooped her up and kissed her forehead. "Did you sleep well, baby?" "Uh-huh. Are we staying here, Mama?" Elena looked at Caleb, who met her gaze steadily. "Yes, sweetheart, we're staying." Lily's face lit up, and she wriggled down to run to Caleb, wrapping her arms around his legs. "We're staying with Caleb." Caleb's expression softened, and he reached down to pat her head awkwardly. "Yeah, kid, you're stuck with me." Tommy whooped and nearly knocked over the pancake batter in his excitement. Elena laughed, a real, genuine laugh that came from deep in her chest, and realized it was the first time she'd laughed like that in years. They ate breakfast together, the four of them crowded around the small table, and it felt like the beginning of something. Not a fairy tale, not perfect, but real. And that was enough. Over the next few days, Elena went into town with Caleb to sign the paperwork that officially freed her from Richard Voss. Sheriff Garrett walked her through every step, making sure she understood her rights, and by the time they were done, Elena felt like she could finally breathe. Richard was arrested 2 states over, caught trying to flee the country with embezzled money. The judge who'd signed the fraudulent writ was removed from the bench and faced his own charges. The bounty hunters scattered, none of them wanting to face legal consequences for their actions. Justice, Elena learned, was slow and imperfect, but it was still justice. When they returned to the ranch, Caleb started teaching Elena and the children how to work the land. He showed Tommy how to care for the horses, how to mend fences, how to chop wood without losing a finger. He taught Lily how to gather eggs from the chickens and tend the small vegetable garden that would be planted come spring. Elena learned, too, how to shoot straight, how to track game, how to survive in the wilderness if she ever needed to again. Not because she expected to run, but because she never wanted to feel helpless again. And slowly, carefully, they started building a life together. It wasn't easy. There were nights when Elena woke from nightmares, her body drenched in sweat, convinced Richard had found them. Caleb would be there, solid and steady, reminding her that she was safe, that he wouldn't let anything happen to her. There were days when Caleb withdrew into himself, the weight of his past pressing down so hard he could barely speak. Elena learned to give him space while still letting him know she was there, that he wasn't alone anymore. And there were moments when the children struggled, when the trauma of what they'd been through surfaced in unexpected ways. Tommy had nightmares too, and Lily sometimes went silent for hours, clutching Clover like a lifeline. But they worked through it, together. Spring came slowly, melting the snow and bringing new life to the land. Elena planted the garden with Lily's help, watching her daughter's face light up as the first seedlings broke through the soil. Tommy started helping Caleb with the horses, his small chest puffing with pride every time Caleb praised his work. And Elena found herself falling into a rhythm she'd never known before. A rhythm of peace, of belonging. One evening, as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Elena stood on the porch watching her children play in the yard. Tommy was teaching Lily how to skip stones in the small creek that ran through the property, their laughter carrying on the wind. Caleb came up beside her, his presence warm and solid. "They're happy," he said quietly. "Yeah, they are. What about you?" Elena turned to look at him, this man who'd saved her life in more ways than one. "I'm happy too." Caleb smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Good." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the children, and Elena felt something settle deep in her chest, a sense of rightness, of home. "You know," she said after a while, "I used to think happiness was something that happened to other people, that I didn't deserve it. And now I think maybe I was wrong. Maybe everyone deserves a chance at happiness, even people like us who've been through hell." Caleb's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "I think you're right." "You happy, Caleb?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Yeah, I am. For the first time in 7 years, I actually am." Elena squeezed his hand, and they stood there as the sun dipped below the horizon, marking the end of one day and the beginning of another. That night, after the children were asleep, Elena and Caleb sat by the fire like they'd done so many times before. But this time, there was no fear hanging over them, no threat lurking in the shadows, just 2 people who'd found each other in the darkest moment and chosen to build something together. "I've been thinking," Caleb said, breaking the silence. "About what?" "About the future. About what we're building here." Elena's pulse quickened. And I want to make it official. Not just you staying here because you have nowhere else to go. I want you to know that this is your home. That you and the kids, you're my family now." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Caleb, I'm not asking you to marry me," he said quickly. "Not yet. I know you need time. I know you need to heal, but I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here, waiting. Because you're it for me, Elena. You and Tommy and Lily, you're my second chance, and I'm not wasting it." Elena couldn't speak, could barely breathe. All she could do was nod and let the tears fall. Caleb pulled her close, and she let herself sink into his embrace, feeling safer than she'd ever felt in her life. The weeks turned into months. The garden grew, the horses thrived, and the children bloomed like wildflowers in the sun. Elena learned to laugh again, to trust again, to believe that good things could last. And Caleb, broken, stubborn, fiercely loyal Caleb, learned that it was okay to let people in. That opening your heart didn't mean you were betraying the people you'd lost. It meant you were honoring them by choosing to live fully again. One warm summer evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the twilight, Tommy looked up at Caleb with serious eyes. "Caleb, can I ask you something?" "Sure, son." "Are you going to be our dad?" The question hung in the air, simple but profound. Caleb looked at Elena, who nodded through tears. He turned back to Tommy and Lily, who'd stopped playing to listen. "Would you want that?" "Yes," Tommy said immediately. "Yes," Lily echoed, climbing into Caleb's lap. Caleb's voice was rough when he spoke. "Then yeah, I'm going to be your dad. That's okay with your mama." "More than okay," Elena whispered. And just like that, they became a family. Not through blood or law, but through choice, through love, through the simple, powerful decision to show up for each other day after day, no matter what. It wasn't perfect. They still had hard days, still had moments when the past tried to drag them back down. But they faced it together, and that made all the difference. Elena thought a lot about the storm that had brought them together, how she'd stood on that frozen ridge, ready to give up everything just so her children might survive. How Caleb had appeared like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known how to speak. She used to think the storm was the worst thing that had ever happened to her. But now she understood. The storm hadn't destroyed her. It had delivered her, delivered all of them to exactly where they needed to be. Because sometimes the things that break us are the same things that save us. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what really matters. And what mattered, Elena had learned, wasn't safety or certainty or a life without pain. What mattered was having people worth fighting for, people who fought for you in return, people who saw your broken pieces and loved you anyway. As fall approached and the leaves began to turn, Caleb and Elena stood in the garden, harvesting the last of the vegetables. The children were at the creek, their voices carrying on the wind. "You ever think about that first day?" Caleb asked. "When I found you on the ridge?" "All the time." "You scared?" "Terrified. I thought I was going to lose them, lose everything." "But you didn't." "No, because of you." Caleb set down the basket he was holding and turned to face her. "It wasn't just me. You fought too. You kept going even when you had every reason to quit. That's not something I gave you. That was already in you." Elena smiled. "Maybe we saved each other." "Yeah, maybe we did." He pulled a small box from his pocket, a nice pocket, and Elena's breath caught. "I know I said I wouldn't ask yet," Caleb said, his voice unsteady. "But I've been carrying this around for weeks, and I can't wait anymore. Elena Voss, will you marry me? Not because you need protection or a home or someone to save you, but because I love you, because I want to spend the rest of my life building this family with you, because you make me believe in second chances." Elena's hand shook as she took the box, opening it to reveal a simple silver band. "Yes," she said through tears. "Yes, I'll marry you." Caleb slid the ring onto her finger, and then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and for a moment the whole world fell away. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and laughing, they heard cheering from the creek. The children had been watching, and now they came running, whooping and hollering. "Does this mean we're a real family now?" Tommy asked. Caleb scooped him up with one arm and pulled Lily close with the other. "We were already a real family, son. This just makes it official." They stood there in the garden, the four of them, as the sun set over the mountains and the first stars appeared in the sky. A man who'd lost everything and learned to live again. A woman who'd run from hell and found home. Two children who'd survived the unthinkable and come out stronger. A family forged not by blood, but by choice, by sacrifice, by love. And as Elena looked at the faces of the people she loved most in the world, she realized something profound. The storm that had nearly killed them had also given them life. It had stripped away everything that didn't matter and left only what did, each other. That was the truth she'd learned in the wilderness, in the cold, in the fear, and the desperate fight for survival. That love wasn't something that happened to you in the easy moments. It was something you chose in the hard ones, something you fought for when everything else tried to tear it away. and she'd keep choosing it every single day. Because that's what family meant. Not perfection, not the absence of pain, but the presence of people who would stand beside you through the worst and still believe in the best. Winter came again, bringing snow and cold winds. But this time, Elena didn't fear the storm. This time, she had a home that couldn't be shaken, a family that couldn't be broken. And as she stood on the porch, watching Caleb teach the children how to build a snowman, she felt something she'd never expected to feel again. Peace. Not the fragile, fleeting kind that disappears at the first sign of trouble, but the deep, unshakable kind that comes from knowing exactly where you belong. She'd spent so many years running, searching, trying to find safety in a world that felt hostile at every turn. And in the end, safety hadn't been a place. It had been a person. 3 people, actually, who'd looked at her broken, desperate, scared self and said, "You're worth fighting for." The children's laughter rang out across the yard, and Caleb looked up, catching her eye. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that still made her heart skip, and Elena smiled back, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, a secret she hadn't told him yet, but would soon. Another beginning, another chance. Because that's what life was, she'd learned, a series of chances. Some you took and some you didn't. Some worked out and some fell apart. But the ones that mattered, the ones worth taking, were the ones that scared you, the ones that asked you to trust when you had no reason to, the ones that demanded everything and promised nothing. She'd taken that chance on a frozen ridge when she'd begged a stranger to save her children, and that stranger had taken a chance on her when he'd decided not to walk away. Now they were building something neither of them had thought possible. A life, a future, a family. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be more storms, more challenges, more moments when the past tried to pull them back. But they'd face it together, the way they'd faced everything else, with stubbornness, with courage, with love. And that, Elena thought, as she joined her family in the snow, was the only thing that really mattered. Not where you came from, not what you'd lost, but who you chose to become when the world gave you a second chance. She'd chosen to survive. She'd chosen to fight. She'd chosen to love. And on that quiet frontier where winter had once brought death, it now brought life, brought hope, brought the promise of tomorrow. The storm had passed, but the family it created would endure, unshakable, unbreakable, finally whole.